Good afternoon and welcome back for another tarot reading. Today we are going to be doing the first of this month's variation on the Chalchiuhtlicue's regenerative spread that was originally done at the beginning of August. Now, I took some of the questions from the review that I did last week, and this reading, the purpose that I came up with is to tap into Chalchiuhtlicue's regenerative powers to help find places that need healing and cleansing. I decided to go with more of a general instead of focusing on the physical aspect, just to see what's coming up, because there are a lot of times we focus a lot on the body and what the body needs to heal, when maybe it's a mental healing that needs to be done or spiritual healing that needs to be done. So I thought it would be interesting to just kind of open it up and see what comes out. The question that I am going to start shuffling into the cards is, how can I tap into Chalchiuhtlicue's healing waters and find the areas in need of regeneration, cleansing, and healing? So we're going to shuffle that into the cards. See what comes up. How can I tap into Chalchiuhtlicue's healing waters and find areas in need of regeneration, cleansing, and healing? Split the deck. Let's see. There we go. So I have decided to stick with the 7 cards as the original spread had. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And let's see what guidance we're going to get today. The first card, the question that I have is, what area of our life, or my life, or your life, would benefit the most from cleansing? And so one of the first steps in the healing process is to wash, clean anything that might be festering, anything that might be oozing and pussing, because you can't heal if there's an infection in there. And be it a story that we have that is old and infectious and insidious, whether it's a spiritual practice we have that it needs to be cleansed. Let's see what comes up. And this is very interesting. And one of the reasons why I find this to be completely interesting, and this is going to make this a very powerful reading, is we have the High Priestess. The reason why I say it's really going to make a powerful reading is that the card that the author associated with Chalchiuhtlicue was the High Priestess. So having the High Priestess come up as the very first card of our reading is an indication that Chalchiuhtlicue is here with us, and she is going to be guiding us, and she's going to be helping us to find the areas that are most in need right now of our attention, of our tending. I can feel, having said that, I can feel kind of a bit emotional, having said that, and feeling this overwhelming urge to kind of cry. And the High Priestess is all about trusting our intuition and trusting what comes up for us. And so when I'm looking at what areas of our lives need most cleansing and feeling like I need to cry, there's some grieving that all of us need to be healing. There's some deep wounds that we're carrying, and be they from childhood or be them from yesterday, they're things that are connecting to some form of grief that we have trapped somewhere within our body. And for us to be able to let this go and to heal, we need to allow it to process through. And the High Priestess is here to say, you know how to let this grief go. So find out when you tap into that grief, which that's the hardest part of it, because grief can be extremely overwhelming, can make us feel like we're going to split apart and explode into a million pieces. And so the High Priestess is here to say, I am here with you. I will be the container for you while you shatter into pieces, and it's okay. And so allow yourself, sit with yourself and really ask yourself the questions, how will I best grieve? We all grieve differently. And asking other people or going and looking at like what are grieving practices, they're not necessarily going to help us to get that deep trapped grief to start to come to the surface. So what you want to do right now is you want to be able to say, okay, first, I guess you have to ask yourself, am I ready for this healing? Am I ready for this process to begin? And if you are, then sit with yourself and kind of you can sit with yourself and feel your way through to see what might be calling your grief forward. Sometimes it's going to be different. For me, I went through a really big grieving process a few years ago, and it was music. So I actually had a playlist that I would play for half an hour every morning, and I would cry. I would sob and literally like collapse into this grief and let it go. And when the music was done, my playlist was about half an hour long. And when the playlist was over, I had released enough for that day so that I could process and move on. But this took, almost a whole year of going through this in order to be able to kind of clear a lot of the grief that had been there. And so it could be music for you. It could be some kind of physical activity. Some people can release their grief by jogging, by doing yoga, by kickboxing. There's certain areas in the body that they find that grief and trauma tend to get trapped more into. So maybe if a physical activity helps you to move energy and move emotions, that might be what you want to look at, is like what kind of physical activity will move those parts of your body, and watch your reactions to it. If you have a reaction that starts to bring emotion up, then that's the path to take. And so the high priestess is very much sitting there saying, it's time to allow this grief to pass, right? Tune into these emotions that are so overwhelmingly powerful that you hide away from them, that you shy away from them, and trust that you know how to process them. So we're being asked to kind of cleanse this grief out of our bodies. So that would lead me to the next question, which is, how can I best support myself to heal in this area? Grieving can be extremely depleting and exhausting. And one of the reasons for that is that the brain is a great, wonderful thing, but it also has the inability to distinguish between reality and illusion. It has the inability to distinguish between physical and intangible. And so when we grieve, the brain goes, oh my goodness, there's something going on here in the body. And the body is like trying to figure out how to get this going. And when it can't find a physical reason, there's no pill that you can take, for instance, that will make the grief go away. And so the body will literally work itself to death trying to find a way to heal a wound that is not a physical wound. And I've looked into this before, and it's really interesting to find that, like, if you're grieving, you can literally deplete everything in your body because your body's trying to heal that perceived wound that the brain thinks is there. And so a lot of times when you hear of stories where you have a couple that was deeply in love and one passes away and within a year the other one has passed, that's grief that does it, is that the body just has no idea how to deal with such a loss and such a strain. And so we really, if we're going to be dealing with healing grief and letting grief go and going through a grieving process to purify and cleanse ourselves in order to move to the next level, then the next card, which is about supporting ourselves during this process, is going to be really important. And so what we have here is we have judgment. And judgment is a call to arms in a way. That just kind of popped out of my mouth, and now I'm trying to think. And I think what it is judgment is that cosmic call to come forward in what you need to do. And so one of the best ways to support ourselves when we're going through grieving is to reach out for a community, for a platform, for a support that's going to help us to be who we are meant to be. And what's interesting is judgment is usually like this kind of wake up call to us to say, you have a divine purpose. You're here for a reason, so you need to come forward. And when you're looking at it from this kind of perspective of, okay, so I I have grief that I've brought here that I have a purpose. This grief has a purpose that I need to bring forward. And so what is it? In the sense of what we're looking at, what it is your grief and your experience of your grief is something that can help others. As you're going through your grief, it's important to be able to be honest with others. And at first, it might just be your core group of people to be able to say, look, I have a lot of grief that I need to heal, that I need to let go. So I need your support. Understand that over the next little while, my emotions may be a little bit unstable. I may have some difficulty regulating myself in different things. So if I get really quiet, maybe just kind of check in with me. It might not be that you need help, that you need support, but just having somebody check in with you to make sure that you're okay is going to be important, because eventually by getting the support that you need, then your grief is going to transform into something beautiful, because we go through grief to find kind of those real gems of the depth of the human experience, because you can only grieve something that you've lost, that you've loved, right? If you had no emotional connection to it, you wouldn't care. And so part of the grieving process is to find out how you are with your emotions and your connections, right? So what is it that you're grieving? Because one loss can connect to a lifetime of losses. And by going through the grieving process and by following this call, right? So this is a cosmic call. The high priestess has said, look it, I'm here with you. You have a cosmic goddess who is here guiding you through this grieving period. And she's saying, this is the time to grieve, right? That's kind of what judgment is. This is the time for you to do the thing that you are here to do. And right now you're here to grieve and you're here to let it go. Because when you allow yourself to go through the metamorphosis that happens when you grieve, you get such a deep, profound understanding of other people's grief. And so you then can become a support. Your story eventually may become something that touches someone else's heart, to be able to get them to understand that there is support there, that grieving is a personal journey, that it's different for everyone. And yet there are still times that they resonate with other people. And so because of that, it's very, very important to be able to come forward and grieve the way you feel is the best way for you to grieve. And so supporting ourselves in this area will mostly come from being able to stand in your authenticity, even while grieving, to be able to not feel that you have to mask it in front of other people, to not feel that you have to hide it and be ashamed of it, because for too long we've been kind of conditioned with this idea that grieving period is this long. Different cultures and different societies had it for different. I mean, there's some cultures where like a widow, for instance, is allowed to grieve for a year, and after a year it's done, right? And the same thing, if you have a loss of something, it's okay to grieve for a couple of months or a few years or whatever, but then after that it's done. But the thing is grieving is never really done. It just changes over time. My father, when he passed away, was, it was a very hard time for me. But even today, I'm looking at it must be almost 20 years, I want to say, since he passed. And there are still times when something will happen in my life that will remind me of him. And I'll just want to break down, right? Because there's still that grief, that loss. And keeping in mind that all grief is connected to love. It's a loss that we've had. It's a love that we lost. And all grieving stems from that. And so it can be challenging. So when the call comes, right, even though we know we've got this beautiful goddess here with us, it can be very, very challenging to find the courage to meet grief and to take grief's hand and journey with grief to find out what grief has to teach. So while we're going through the grieving process, the next card is what will help me understand how to let this go. And what we're looking to let go is not the grief, right? Like we're going to go through the grief, we're going to transcend through the grief, but what we're looking to let go because of what's come up from the two previous cards is the guilt and the shame and the resistance to go through the grieving period. And so what we have here is we have the Page of Wands. And the Page of Wands is a passion message in the sense that there's something that comes from grieving, that when we don't grieve, we become numb. And so when we understand that when we start going through this grieving process, we're going to literally let the genie out of the bottle. That was how I described it when my big grieving period went, was one, I had no idea that a human body could have that much grief, that could hold that many tears, to cry for that long. And at the same time, every time I cried, I felt a part of myself come back to life. And so the Page of Wands is telling us that, when you allow yourself to let go of the shame, when you allow yourself to let go of the fear and the resistance that you have around facing this grief journey that you have to take in order to heal all areas of your life, going through this will help you regain your passion. This is an invitation, very much like Judgment here is an invitation, although Judgment is a cosmic invitation. The Page of Wands is more of an everyday kind of invitation. It's an invitation from a friend, right? To be able to reconnect with parts of ourselves. And this is a choice that we have, right? Like this is a choice that we can either accept this invitation to go on this adventure and know that as we go through, we're going to stoke the fires of our passions in ways that we may not have realized. One of the things I'm finding really interesting about the Page of Wands here is that the Page of Wands is a fire card. Chalchiuhtlicue is a water goddess. And so having this connection between the water goddess and the Page of Wands is going to have us looking at how we can kind of like heat up these waters. And I kind of think of an onsen or a hot bath, or like, like where you're getting into these really, really hot waters in order to kind of sweat out whatever it is, the impurities and everything. And so when you kind of put yourself into a situation like that, you then can actually become a lot more vulnerable and a lot more open, because when you think of something like hot yoga, for instance, people can get into a lot more complicated postures during hot yoga than they could just doing yoga regularly, because when the body heats up, it becomes more pliable. The muscles will stretch more, the pores and everything will open. And so this is also an invitation to understand that the grieving process is also going to trigger a very deep, very profound cleansing process. Because when we hold all these emotions in, when we hold them in, they can actually become toxic in the body, because they get stuck in the muscles, they get stuck in the cells. And as this happens, it ends up mutating the cells, it ends up damaging the DNA strands. And so in order for us to be able to really kind of allow the grieving process to go through and to understand the benefit of it, we have to understand the detriment that not allowing us to go through the grieving process is doing. And because of this, the Page of Wands is coming forward and offering us a gentle, because she is the page, and so she is younger than the other in the court cards. So she is coming, and I believe she's got a little like fire dragon here, right? So she's coming with this wisdom of the elders to be able to say that this is going to be a long process. And so let's start gently. Right? Fire can be quite powerful, but when it's controlled, especially if you have the water around you to support you, it's so much easier to go through the process. It's kind of like, you don't want to go to the extreme of this, but it's kind of like how to boil a frog, right? Like they always say that to boil a frog, you put the frog in the water and you slowly increase the water. So in order for us to be able to understand, we have to understand that we have to slowly start to release these toxins. We have to slowly go about this, but we have to do it in a way that is meaningful to us, right? Like we're following a call that has meaning. And so the Page of Wands is coming and saying, look it, you have to understand that this is an invitation of purification through fire. And in order for you to do that, you have to also understand that it's a cleansing fire. And so we need to go through this so we can cleanse our body and stop any further deterioration. And not just our body, right? Like our mental state, our emotional state. We have to go through this in order to cleanse everything so that we can be who we are here and meant to be. The next card we have is, how can I create space for regeneration? This is really a grieving process, right? So here we have the Three of Swords. So the best way to create space for regeneration is to make space for the grieving, right? We've all lost things, no matter whether we remember them or not, we have all lost things. And from the very moment of birth, right, when we lost the safety and the security of being in the womb to being brought out into, the cold light of day, we all have things down deep into the core that we need to grieve and we need to let go of. And one of the things that's also important to remember about is the invitation of the Page of Wands may also be coming to us to remind us to say, hey, you know what? Some of the grieving that you need to do is to release and cleanse ancestral grief and trauma that you're carrying around with you. And so right now, because you're going to go through this, should you choose to do this, what you really want to do is create space for this grieving, because the grieving is going to take time and it is going to impact all areas of your life. Because when you're grieving, a lot of energy, a lot of your mind, a lot of your emotion, a lot of your spiritualness will all go into this process. And so having people around to make sure that you're eating, to make sure that you're sleeping, to make sure that you're doing different things without the judgment, right? Because your grieving journey is going to look different from everyone else's. So it's important to make sure that you're making time and space for that grieving process. I'll also say it's interesting that this is the middle card of the whole spread. And so everything is leading up to this. And then from here, if you make the space for it, everything will kind of bring you back out of it. So what is the best way to create supports for a healthy replacement? So once we've let the grief out, we need to then bring something else in. And I don't think it's necessarily about bringing more in. It's about honoring that transformation of the grieving. But it's also what we want to be looking at is the best way to create supports to keep the grieving process kind of alive in a way, so that when something comes, we can grieve it in a healthier way instead of locking it down and letting it build up again. And so here we have another messenger. And this one's interesting because now we have the Page of Cups. So here's almost like baby Chalchiuhtlicue kind of coming. So we had her like in full power at the beginning saying, trust the first thing that comes up. And that led us to the grieving process and stepping into all of that. And now we have the Page of Cups after the grieving process, mind you, coming back to say, look, now that you've gone through this purification, now that you've allowed yourself to feel all of this stuff and let it go, now it's time to come back to yourself. Now it's time to start to regulate your emotions. Now it's time to regulate your community. Now it's time to regulate your creativity, because now that you've let a lot of this, I want to say dead weight, but what I mean is a deadeningness away, because grief will numb us to everything. And so now here's the healing waters. Here's the invitation to partake in the real, true cleansing that Chalchiuhtlicue will offer. So once you've gone through the grieving process, it's very important then to allow yourself to have a period of soothing, to be able to have healthy practices. It might be a weekly check-in. It might be a daily check-in. It might be once a month you go and you spend time alone and you allow yourself to feel all your emotions. Take a retreat, go to a spa, get a massage, whatever it is, it's something soothing. It's something that's going to be for your benefit. It could also be something that's a creative practice that it's time to kind of bring into, because now that you've gotten rid of a lot of the things that are numbing you and keeping you from what it is you really want to do and experience, now's the time to have all of this clarity, to have all of this freshness that's going to be coming in. The other thing that the Page of Cups is going to do is she's also going to kind of call us to play. She's going to say it's time to kind of tap into these waters of creativity. I would also say that the Page of Cups, because pages are invitations, they're news, there's messages coming through, that this may also be an invitation for you to, once you've done your grieving process, to the point where you feel that you have actually moved a lot of energy, that you've moved a lot of those emotions out of the body, it might actually be a good idea to travel to some kind of body of water. Because Chalchiuhtlicue is connected to the Aztecs, doesn't mean you have to move down there, but to get to the ocean, right? So it might be a really good way to go and find some kind of body of water. If you can get to the ocean, even better, but to find a body of water that you can submerge yourself into and basically kind of do like an anointment or a rebaptism of some kind after you've done the process, to literally wash your physicalness clean and allow yourself to leave everything else behind as you come out of the water. The next one is, what actions will help me see this through? So now we have the Queen of Swords. And the actions that are going to help you see this through, when you're looking at the Queen of Swords, it's the ability to disconnect, in a good way, your heart from your mind. Because when you get caught up in all of your emotions, it's very, very easy to stay in that grieving process, to stay in all of those lower fear-based kind of emotions. And what the Queen of Swords is going to do, she's going to come out and she's going to say, you know what? That big hurdle of grieving is over. You've washed yourself clean, in the waters of Chalchiuhtlicue, and now it's time for you to make a new contract with yourself, right? So what you need to do is you need to be able to understand what the grieving has brought you, right? What was purged away and what has been ignited in the passions of all of this. And the Queen of Swords is coming and saying, look, you need to renegotiate your personal contracts, your soul contracts with yourself, and where it is that you want to go and what it is that you want to do. Because she's the queen, she deals with those like more homey aspects, right? Like she's very much that personal sphere of influence. And you always start with yourself. And so what she's saying is you need to be able to stand up for yourself. And now that you've gone through this, you need to be able to take what you've gone through and be able to express it to the people that are most important to you and to the people that you're going to have the influence on, that need to hear what you're going to say. One of the things that might help with this is to be able to, again, like take time with yourself. If it means writing up a personal contract with yourself, then that's what you're going to want to do. But it's really more about being clear with yourself about what's important at this point, and to kind of understand what you've gone through in order to be able to really stand in where you are at this point. And the last one is, what is the best way for me to create a container for myself during this process? Wow, now we have the King of Swords. So we just had the Queen, who was all about, renegotiate your personal contracts and be very clear with yourself about what you want. And now the King of Swords is saying, in order to create the best container for yourself, you have to create boundaries. You have to be very willing and, in some cases, firm with the people outside, right? In order to be able to say, look, I need this time for myself. And so this is my boundary, and respect that this is my boundary. And one of the reasons why it's about people outside of yourself in this case is because the king deals with the public sphere, right? So here you have the personal sphere, and then here you have the public sphere. And so the King of Swords is coming in and saying, look, if you're going to go through this, know that it's going to be hard. Know there's going to be judgment. There's going to be criticism. There's going to be people that aren't going to understand what you're doing. And you need to be able to trust that when you set a boundary, that you're going to hold it for yourself, and that you're going to make sure that whatever you say to people, it's going to be said in a way that's going to be very clear, very to the point, and you're going to cut through any of that kind of red tape and that hesitation and that slowing down that can happen. The King of Swords is also going to come in and be able to say, you know what? One of the things that you might also need as creating this container for you is you might also need an advocate. You might need someone who's willing to be able to speak for you, whether this be looking at getting a therapist or having somebody who's done grief training and can help you guide you through this. That's going to be another thing that you might want to look at, especially once you hit the main part of the grieving process. You have no idea what's going to come out. And so one of the things that's going to be really, really important is that you can find someone that you can speak to that is also going to be able to stay that distance and not become enmeshed into whatever stories and whatever emotions and stuff might be coming up. So looking at the cards that we have, it's interesting that we start right out of the gate bang with two major arcana cards that are pretty much almost close to the beginning of the end, because you have the High Priestess, which is the second card, and then you have Judgment, which is the 20th card. So there's only like one card after Judgment, and the High Priestess has like the Fool and the Magician before her. But these are cards that are very much about a beginning and an ending of a journey. So this whole thing, when we're looking at what needs to be regenerated and cleansed, you're looking at a whole journey in a bit of a microcosm, because what this is going to do is it's going to be like, you need to get all of this stuff done from beginning to end. And because they're back to back, right? Like you need to get this done from beginning to end for the whole rest of the process to evolve the way that it needs to happen. We have Wands and Cups, one of each, and both of them are the pages. And they both, interestingly enough, bookend the Three of Swords. So there's going to be an invitation to get into the grieving process that might be travel based as well, because the pages and the wands, they can indicate some kind of travel. And then you're going to have the Page of Cups at the end, who is going to be an invitation out of it. And so you're kind of going to be looking for these invitations to show up, so that you're like going, okay, yes, this is the time for this grieving to be. And the invitation for the grieving to begin might be something like requesting some time off from work, or scheduling some time to alone to be able to start the process. Whatever feels right to you. And that's what I'm going to really enforce, is that we start off with the High Priestess, whatever feels right to you. So the invitation that comes, it's going to be you. You're going to go, oh, this feels like it's the invitation for this grieving process to begin. It's all going to be how you feel, how you interpret the signs, how the different things happen for you. And then we have Three Swords, which is interesting that we have the Three of Swords, which is our middle card. So this is our hump that we have to get over. So if you're looking 7 cards, 7 days in a week, right? So here's hump day. Most people like Wednesday, and then you've got the King and Queens that kind of end it at the end. So a lot of this is going to be getting clear, right? And having this, that's one of the things that's interesting about having the King and the Queen of Swords at the very end, is a lot of it is once you've come through, then it's logicking through everything, right? It's looking at, so where are you? How do you feel? How have things changed? What needs to be shared with other people, right? Everything up to the King and the Queen is all like, it's all emotion, it's all passion, it's all major life movement and energy and all that kind of stuff. And then you get into the King and Queen, who are very much, clear. They're clear. And that's one of the things that's really, really important to understand, is when you're dealing with swords, you're dealing with clear-headedness, you're dealing with logic. They can be a little bit I want to say argumentative, in more of like a negative role, but in the sense of where they are now, they're coming at their most exalted positions from their powers. And so they're basically saying that when you go through all of this, you will come out clear. And the Queen is saying you're going to come out clear to yourself first, and you're going to know what it is that you need to do in order to be able to have what you need to have to be at your best. And you're going to be able to explain it to yourself and to those closest around you in a way that they can understand. And once that's happened, the King of Swords comes in and says, look, now you're going to be able to do it to a much broader audience. So at the end, when you go through all of this, then your challenge and is to step forward and to share what you've gone through with others so that you can then help them find clarity, help invite them into their own grieving process, and to be kind of the catalyst of change for the next person that's going to go through this journey. So I hope you enjoyed this regenerative spread, looking at how we can kind of find some healing and kick off a cleansing process for ourselves. And I hope that you come back and join me next week when we look at another variation of Chalchiuhtlicue's regenerative spread. In the meantime, I hope you like the video, and if you want, subscribe to my channel, and I will look forward to seeing you again next time. Take care.